Those of you who are knee-deep in American politics probably know the name George Conway. He was until recently a lifelong Republican who also until recently was married to Kellyanne Conway, one of Donald Trump's top advisors. But during Trump's candidacy and his administration and his post-administration candidacy, Conway has been one of Trump's fiercest critics. It probably contributed to the death of his marriage. And he was recently interviewed by C-SPAN. And during the conversation, he actually took a phone call from a pro-Trump Republican voter, and it led to a fascinating exchange. And I want to talk about all of it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, got a couple of clips to play with you here. And I actually want to start this one here. It's about 3 minutes long. This is the exchange between George Conway, again, a former lifelong Republican, married to Kellyanne Conway, now a strident Trump critic and troll. He goes above and beyond trying to troll Donald Trump and get under his skin, and it appears to be working. And the other person at the other end of the phone is a Republican voter who's very upset with George Conway. And I want you to hear this exchange because it's really powerful.
Whitsett, North Carolina. Mark on the Trump-Vance line. You're on with George Conway.
Yeah, I'm a little bit disturbed about the double standards you're applying on what you're saying. For example, you dismissed Joe Biden's comments about calling all of Trump's supporters garbage, and that's what he said.
He did not say that, caller. He did not. He did not. He said that the racism, the disgusting comments about Hispanics were objection. I read the quote too, sir. You're just wrong, and I know you want to believe that's what he said. But by the way, he's not running for president. The other guy is.
Now, before this continues, again, I just want to. This is a huge nothing burger that MAGA Republicans are desperate to pounce on to distract from the disastrous Madison Square Garden rally for Donald Trump. President Biden, during I think it was Voto Latino Zoom call, was talking about Tony Hinchcliffe, who was a comedian who spoke at the Trump Madison Square Garden rally. And Hinchcliffe made some pretty racist comments about Puerto Rico and Puerto Ricans. They were styled as jokes. And Biden has been calling this out for several days. And he did so again during the Zoom call. And during the Zoom call, when discussing a Trump supporter, and in context, he's talking about Tony Hinchcliffe. He's like, the Trump supporter at the Madison Square Garden rally. And then he says, in response to the line that Puerto Rico is an island of garbage, I think that was something that the Hinchcliffe said. I think it's almost verbatim what he said. President Biden said, the only garbage I see is his supporters, and he meant to say his supporters' comments, but then he stuttered, his supporters, his demonization of Latinos. Well, he meant to say his supporters' demonization of Latinos, his supporter, apostrophe S, supporters' demonization of Latinos, referring to Hinchcliffe, right? Of course, MAGA Republicans pounced on this, and what they wanted to do is stop the thing at supporters and assume there's no apostrophe and say that Biden is referring to all Trump supporters, which totally contradicts how Biden has conducted himself in public office. And then Biden actually released a statement about an hour later saying, hey, listen, just want to clear the air about this. I was referring to a single supporter, and that single supporter's demonization of Latinos, that supporter being Tony Hinchcliffe, a comedian. This is what the caller is talking about, and this is what George Conway just had to refute in real time. But the conversation continues.
Mark, did you want to respond?
To call Trump a fascist, calling his supporters fascist. I'm not a fascist. I'm a freedom-loving Republican. And for you to say that Trump supporters are fascist, it's just wrong.
I didn't say Trump supporters are fascist. I think they may be supporting a fascist. Sir, okay, I was a Republican from 1980 to 2018. Okay? I don't want to see a Republican Party led by a fascist, but he is a fascist. He cannot help but be a fascist. His personality disorders make him a fascist. He does not care about anyone else. He does not care about the rule of law. He does not care about justice. He does not care about right and wrong. He's a criminal. He's a convicted criminal, 34 counts. He stands charged with many other counts on which I really don't think he has much of a defense. He's an adjudicated sexual abuser found by a New York City jury, that included, frankly, people north of the city who were probably Republicans, unanimously found him liable for inserting his hand, in a physical assault, inserting his fingers in a woman's vagina, which the judge called rape. He is, by any colloquial standard, a rapist. Okay? He is a bad man. And why all of you out there seem to want to excuse him and pretend that reality is something other than what it is and what you want it to be is the problem. And I don't say that you're garbage because of that. I think you need to look in the mirror someday and start thinking about, is this man the man you want your children or your grandchildren to emulate?
That was just a really powerful exchange. There are other clips I'm going to play for you here that are shorter, but I just, this is Conway not being condescending at all. Obviously the caller was upset because he felt that not only was Trump being demonized, Trump wasn't being demonized. I would argue he is a fascist. But the caller also felt that he in turn was being aggrieved and demonized. And I'm trying to be respectful of that, but it's also really frustrating because simply criticizing Trump and even attacking Trump, that's what we're going to call it, an attack, isn't necessarily an indictment of Republicans any more than Republicans attacking Vice President Harris or Joe Biden is an attack on their supporters. And if that's what the caller believes, if you attack Trump, you're attacking me, well, then you need to shut up and not criticize Democrats, because otherwise you're attacking Democratic voters and other Democrats who live in this. This is the problem. It's like, sir, what is it? Either we can criticize politicians or we can't. But we're not going to live in a world where you get to criticize Democratic politicians and not give a damn about how Democrats like me feel, but we have to protect your feelings. It's either we protect everybody's feelings or it's fair game for everybody. Pick a lane. And that's so frustrating about the aggrieved sensibility which animates so much of the MAGA movement. Number one. Number two, George Conway didn't attack this person. He said specifically, like, I'm not calling you a fascist, sir. You may be supporting a fascist, but that doesn't necessarily make you one. And he goes and gives the many, many personal and ethical examples of Donald Trump's transgressions, which this person would probably not co-sign or tolerate if it were in any other candidate. If it were Kamala Harris or Joe Biden, who was a convicted felon or an adjudicated sexual abuser or rapist, this caller would probably be outraged, and understandably so. But because it's Trump, we have to grade him on a curve. It's ridiculous. And so I think that, this carries a lot of credibility, especially coming from George Conway, who was a lifelong Republican and who was speaking very honestly, very bluntly, but not cruelly. I think it was really a really interesting exchange. Some other clips I want to play, though, from the C-SPAN interview with George Conway.
Kamala Harris is essentially being nitpicked, whereas, Donald Trump can say, I want to, just off the cuff, say, I want to eliminate all federal taxes, which is insane. And yet, people are worried about what people are saying. Well, Kamala Harris was very, very unclear about what her policy on kumquat farming in California was. It really is just a double standard, which is created by the fact that we've been watching an absolute, frankly, lunatic who knows virtually nothing about politics, economics, foreign policy, even after all these years. And he's held to a lower standard because he has brought standards down for himself, but somehow or another.
Again, 100%. I love the fact that Conway is calling this out. This is absolutely true. I was going to play this other remark about this other clip about the Washington Post. Conway kind of tears into, understandably, these media institutions like the LA Times, the Washington Post, I think USA Today, that say that they're not going to endorse a presidential candidate for the first time in decades. Of all the elections, to not do that, it seems really cowardly and risky, especially when one of the candidates, Donald Trump, has repeatedly threatened to go after the media when he doesn't like them. So it would seem to me that you would want him to be defeated in the election, and it might help if you actually endorse his opponent, his only viable opponent, Kamala Harris, ahead of the election. But whatever. But this entire exchange was really insightful, and it was really powerful. And again, I think it's so important that if you see a former Republican, just to go back to the second clip, a former Republican who was well aware of his party's tactics and the asymmetry which benefits his party, saying that actually, yeah, Donald Trump is the beneficiary of a double standard. We hyperfixate on Vice President Kamala Harris. We hold her to impossible standards. She has to have an encyclopedic knowledge, not just a basic knowledge, not just a working knowledge, an encyclopedic, fathomless knowledge of domestic and foreign policy on every little minute detail. But we don't expect the same thing of Donald Trump. It is unfair. It is irrational. It is stupid. And it could potentially, jeopardize the election outcome as we continue to grade Donald Trump on a curve. So it's good that more and more people are calling it out, especially somebody, again, like George Conway, a former Republican who happened to be married to one of Donald Trump's top allies and top surrogates, Kellyanne Conway. Really interesting stuff. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.